Welcome to the day that hasn't arrived yet. Today is the day when people stop owning anything, and at first, it does not feel like a loss, it feels like convenience, it feels like freedom from maintenance, freedom from clutter, freedom from responsibility, freedom from commitment. In the old world, ownership was heavy. You bought the house, fixed the roof, paid the taxes, repaired the car, replaced the battery, updated the machine, cleaned the space, stored the object, and when something broke, it became your problem. Ownership was never just possession, it was burden, friction, cost, and obligation. The future does not attack ownership by force, it makes ownership feel stupid, inefficient, outdated, and emotionally exhausting. It begins quietly, the way almost every permanent change begins, with small upgrades that seem too useful to refuse. Why own DVDs when you can stream everything? Why buy software when a subscription updates itself? Why keep a car in the driveway when one arrives in 2 minutes? Why fill a house with tools you rarely use when platforms can deliver exactly what you need exactly when you need it? The first generation gives things up happily because access feels richer than possession. You no longer own 10 movies, you access 10 million. You no longer own one car, you access a global fleet. You no longer own shelves of games, books, devices, servers, and media. You rent a door into a cloud that seems infinite, and in the beginning, this feels less like dispossession and more like abundance. That is how the old instinct begins to die, not through confiscation, but through seduction. The logic is powerful because it is not entirely wrong. Ownership is expensive, inefficient, unequal, and often wasteful. A private car sits unused most of the day, a spare room sits empty most of the year, a drill is used for minutes and stored for decades. A lawn mower becomes dead weight for 11 months, and every object asks for space, money, energy, and care. Platform civilization sees all of this and offers a cleaner deal. Stop owning the underused world, and simply access what you need when you need it. For crowded cities, stressed workers, young renters, mobile professionals, and people already priced out of stability, this feels almost merciful. Why save for 20 years to own a thing when a smarter system can give you immediate access to better versions forever? So the culture changes, first in entertainment, then in software, then in transport, then in housing, and eventually in the very idea of what a person is supposed to control. The object itself matters less than the interface that summons it. You do not need a stereo, just an account. You do not need a library, just a login. You do not need a private office, just a membership. You do not need a guest room, just temporary accommodation credits. You do not need your own appliances, furniture, vehicle, workspace, or even neighborhood services, because the city becomes a subscription layer wrapped around your life, and every year, the argument becomes more convincing: better products, less hassle, lower upfront cost, fewer repairs, no storage, no depreciation, no insurance headaches, no wasted assets, no long-term commitment. Why own when you can access? Why keep when you can upgrade? Why build when you can subscribe? Behind that question hides a deeper transformation. Because ownership never meant only utility, it meant power, memory, continuity, and independence. To own something was to possess a small protected zone of life that no one could casually revoke. It meant your chair was still your chair tomorrow, your home could hold your history, your tools were ready without permission, your books could not vanish through a licensing dispute, your car could not be disabled because a contract changed, your world contained pieces of reality that were not mediated by someone else's dashboard. But the future slowly removes that protected zone, replacing possession with permission, and permission is a very different kind of freedom. At first, the user barely notices, because access works beautifully when the system loves you, when your payment's clear, your score is strong, your behavior fits the terms, your region is supported, your identity is verified, your subscription is active. The rented world feels smooth, elegant, almost magical. A person in this system can move through life with astonishing efficiency, unlocking homes, vehicles, devices, food plans, medical services, entertainment, education, childcare, workspaces, and travel through one seamless account. The friction disappears, and with it, the old temptation to own. Why clutter your life with things when the network itself has become your toolbox? But permission has a shadow, because what is granted can also be limited, downgraded, priced differently, ranked, throttled, suspended, or removed. once ownership becomes socially rare, withdrawal becomes far more dangerous. In a subscription civilization, losing access is not an inconvenience, it is a partial disappearance from daily life. Imagine waking up in a world where the door to your apartment opens through a service contract, your car arrives through a mobility plan, your work tools require active authentication, your medicine dispenser recognizes your monthly authorization, your entertainment, communication, and banking all flow through managed layers. And then imagine one payment issue, one identity error, one automated flag, one platform merger, one policy shift, and suddenly the world becomes narrower around you. This is the hidden cost of non-ownership. Your life becomes fluid, but it also becomes revocable. Housing will be the most emotional battlefield, because for thousands of years the home was more than shelter, it was inheritance, security, rootedness, proof that your labor could become a place no one casually moved beneath your feet. Yet ownership of homes is already breaking under the pressure of global cities, financialization, investor concentration, unstable wages, and generational inequality. For millions, property is no longer a dream delayed, it is a dream removed, and into that vacuum comes the next promise. Why own a home when residential access can become a service? Why buy a kitchen, living room, office, guest room, gym, cinema, nursery, storage space, and repairs separately when an integrated living platform can flex around your changing needs? You do not own the apartment, but you upgrade the floor plan, swap locations, add work modules, reduce costs, access communal amenities, and move frictionlessly through a network of optimized living spaces. To a generation locked out of property anyway, this will not feel like surrender, it will feel like the only honest version of adulthood they were ever offered. Transportation follows the same path, first convenience, then inevitability. The privately owned car becomes inefficient in dense smart cities, hard to park, expensive to insure, mechanically annoying, and embarrassing compared to autonomous fleets that are cleaner, cheaper, constantly updated, and always available. Then even luxury changes meaning. Status is no longer in what you possess, but in what level of access you command. Premium mobility, premium environments, premium privacy, premium response times, premium neighborhoods, premium educational streams, premium healthcare layers. The wealthy still control more, of course, but they increasingly control it through superior permissions rather than simple possession, and the middle class adapts by internalizing a new moral language. Flexible is smart, local is enough, minimalism is enlightened, ownership is dead weight, commitment is primitive, portability is freedom. Behind every slogan is a system learning how to separate people from the stubborn material anchors that once gave them leverage. Even digital life trains this reflex long before the physical world completes the transition. People already pay endlessly for music they do not own, films they cannot keep, games they merely license, software that stops working when the subscription ends, cloud files tied to companies, smart devices that can be remotely limited, ebooks that can disappear, virtual items that feel valuable yet remain fully controlled by platforms. The young will grow up assuming this is normal, that reality itself comes in tears, that existence means maintaining access, not accumulating durable possession, and once that psychology is formed, the physical economy follows with less resistance. Clothing becomes subscription wardrobes, furniture becomes rotating interiors, appliances become bundled services, food becomes nutrition plans, education becomes lifelong licensed learning environments, healthcare becomes behavior-linked access packages, and eventually even parts of identity begin to detach from stable ownership. You do not own your data profile, your trained AI companion, your augmented work systems, your digital self-archives, or your memory infrastructure in the way earlier generations imagined ownership. You simply occupy them under terms. That is when the question becomes darker, because a society without ownership is not automatically a society without inequality. It may be the opposite. In a world where almost nothing is possessed, the people who own the platforms become more powerful than the people who once owned the objects. If you do not own the house, the vehicle, the software, the farm, the robot fleet, the health platform, the school system, the identity rails, the cloud, the payment network, or the legal protocol that connects them, then someone else does, and their power becomes less visible precisely because your daily life still appears comfortable. The cage, if it arrives, may arrive upholstered, warm, personalized, and beautifully designed. There will be defenders of this new world, and some of them will make strong arguments. They will say ownership was always unevenly distributed, that the old dream belonged mostly to those lucky enough to buy into the right era, that access can reduce waste, increase efficiency, lower barriers, and redistribute quality. They will say fewer and used assets mean cleaner cities, smaller homes, less extraction, less duplication, and less ecological damage. They will say people do not need to own more things, they need reliable access to better systems, and on many days, for many people, they will sound correct, but the emotional and political question remains: what happens to human dignity when almost every layer of life becomes conditional? What happens to memory when objects no longer stay? What happens to family continuity when nothing material passes down except credentials? What happens to rebellion when your tools can be shut off, your transportation rerouted, your housing downgraded, your communications filtered, your services repriced, and your social existence quietly narrowed through invisible switches? Ownership once acted as a crude shield against total dependency, imperfect, unfair, but real. Without it, a person may enjoy unprecedented convenience while standing on almost no independent ground at all. There will still be holdouts, people who collect physical books, repair old machines, buy land, keep analog tools, resist smart locks, store offline archives, and teach their children that to own even a small number of real things is to own a fragment of tomorrow. These people will look strange, nostalgic, stubborn, maybe paranoid, until the first major systems failure reminds everyone what access really means when the network falters. Then for a moment the old instinct returns, the instinct to keep something no password can revoke, something no quarterly policy can redesign, something that remains yours even in silence, even in chaos, even when the platform forgets your name. But those moments may not stop the broader trend, because convenience is addictive, and generations trained by convenience rarely choose friction unless fear becomes unbearable. So when will people stop owning anything? Not all at once, not by law on one dramatic morning, but through 1,000 practical decisions that slowly teach society to prefer permission over possession. They will stop owning things when access becomes cheaper than saving, when cities become too dense for private accumulation, when products become too software-dependent to control independently, when housing becomes too financialized to buy, when platforms become too integrated to leave, when status shifts from possessions to tiered experiences, and when a generation raised on subscriptions begins to see ownership not as freedom, but as maintenance with sentimental branding. The final stage arrives when the very idea of permanent possession starts to feel emotionally irrational. Why hold, why store, why repair, why commit, why inherit, why anchor yourself to matter when the network promises endless flexible abundance? That is the day the old civilization truly ends, because once people no longer want to own, they no longer notice what power they surrendered when ownership disappeared. And that may be the most dangerous part of all, not that things are taken, but that they are willingly exchanged for convenience so complete it feels like progress, right? Until the moment permission replaces freedom so fully that nobody remembers there was once a difference. This was another day from the future. Until next time.